immediately focus. It's like, why do we remember Sherlock Holmes? Why do they continue to reboot Sherlock as a character in a million different ways? It's because Sherlock Holmes is an archetype that we can all brand ourselves to. He's my favorite misunderstood genius character. That's why we like Sherlock Holmes. We like him being a prick, like him being autistic, and kind of knowing he's better than everybody else, but living the life of actually being better than everyone else. And I know that I'm not Sherlock Holmes.
And the loneliness of it that drove his closeness with Watson.
Yeah. Like, I know I'm not Holmes, but he represents like the most best version of what I'd like to be in life, For me, like, I always ask people, well, who's your favorite X-Men? And for me, it's always either Hank McCoy or I can't remember the guy's name. I never remember it, but Nightcrawler. Like, Beast and Nightcrawler are my two favorite X-Men for a variety of reasons.
Kurt Wagner.
Yeah, there we go. That's right. Both of them are great characters, and why do they resonate with me? I mean, we could that could be its own show right there. Well, why do I resonate with these two characters? The fact of the matter is that there's nobody, if I ask that question, who's your favorite X-Men, that's not going to have an answer. All I can tell you for sure is that it won't be Cyclops.
He's not my top number one, but I actually like Cyclops quite a bit.
Or you don't know how many things you just told me about yourself there, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm sure. My favorite X-Man is Colossus.
He'd be high on my list. I love Colossus. And what do I love about Colossus is that Colossus, even in what is already, because they were already starting to subvert tropes with the X-Men, Colossus kind of represents that classic, old school, like one-dimensional good guy. He's the big strong man that, goes out to do good. He's, the voice of reason. He's the guy who sounds like Superman in the X-Men world. And so I certainly respect him for that.
Yeah, I was fascinated by him because the concept to me was less offensive and more defensive. Even though he was super strong, the idea was that he was the devoted defender type. He armored up and then he was in the way of things that were trying to hurt everybody else. And that was sort of his personality. And even in his backstory, that was where it all all kind of culminated. The tragic accident where his powers erupted in the first place. And I was fascinated by that. And then I was more fascinated when they brought in the concept of his sister and trying to protect her. His whole motivation was, I just want to save people.
Well, I'm curious, and you think they did a good job with him in like the most recent Deadpool movie? Okay, I'm curious. What are the issues you have? Because by what you mentioned there, I mean, that's the way they play his character. He's the defender. He's not the guy they put in the offense. He's the guy that's there specifically to absorb the blows from Juggernaut. Like, he's there so Juggernaut doesn't just destroy everybody.
Right. And while the representation of the character was accurate, the context of his position in the narrative as the quote unquote straight man to Deadpool's zaniness, like they did the odd couple thing with the two of them. And I think that was the whole point of using the character in the first place, was that Deadpool's wackiness was in such stark contrast to Colossus, to Piotr's seriousness about the profession of heroism, that it worked in the story. And I'm fine with that. But for people who may not recognize the character regularly, like most people, you say X-Men, the first thing that comes up is Wolverine. Anyone, a fan of X-Men as a comic book throughout the decades, will go, okay, yeah, it's a good representation, but they made him a joke on purpose because it's a jokey movie, sure. But someone who goes to watch Deadpool just because they watched the first Deadpool movie and is shown the character for the first time of Colossus is going to think this guy's a doofy idiot.
Okay. Well, I guess I can see that. Yeah, allowing you to be the brunt of the joke in that sense. But in that context, you're also making Deadpool. If you're watching a Deadpool movie, you're probably watching it because, once again, that whole character exists to subvert the idea of a superhero in the first place. Like, that's, he's part of that new world, part of that world where it was the Watchmen and shit like that. So, well, moving along, let's kind of pivot here because we're actually over time already. It's too much crap to talk about with you, Daniel. What are the things from an author's standpoint that you think that people need to be focusing more on when it comes to marketing their books?
Stop trying to sell people your world. The world is not going to draw people in. Historically, from a marketing standpoint, look at commercials for every movie. Every shot is about the hero, and the in-betweens are the interactions with the supporting cast. It's about connecting with the character. It's about connecting with some person in the cast that can draw readers or observers or whatever into the story. And then once they're into the story, then you show them the world that it's all happening in. It reminds me of plays. Plays back used to be the premier way of telling a story we'll go so far back even to Shakespeare. Plays were done on a stage with very minimal set dressing. And what made people keep coming back to these stories was not the set. It was the characters that were being portrayed, and how well the characters were being portrayed, and how well written the characters were to be portrayed.
Well, moreover than that, even, like, people that grow up in our age, they don't understand even like how much the microphone has changed things. Because when you go back to Shakespeare, the dialogue itself had to carry, because you were basically screaming at the top of your lungs to get the dialogue out. There was no acting, there was no inflection, there's none of it. Like, that's all shit that we do now because we have microphones that can amplify when you're whispering. But
right, turn a whisper into a shout.
That didn't exist back then. You had to be able to get it out in the dialogue what you were trying to say. And man, it's like when you think about movies today. Like, look at the acting. Everyone's like, "Oh, The Rock's a fine actor." No, The Rock's a terrible actor. He gets behind the fact that we have digital video and can record as many takes as we want. Like, they used to record 2-hour movies in like a week and a half, because guys could just show up, crush the role. Humphrey Bogart's not going to take 6 months to make a damn movie because he went in there and he acted and he had the character right.
We were just talking about that on Iron Age Nights, the Westerns getting done in 2 weeks.
Well, they show up, they embody the character, they do it, boom, we move on to the next thing. Like, it's not complicated storytelling. You're just putting someone in that role to fill the archetype. And it's why, if you're going to tell a story, like, you need to focus on, like, what is the thing that makes this version of this archetype unique. One of my favorite storylines I have, and I love the author too. That's why I got hooked on him through this work, though. James Lovegrove, who just released a new one in the series, but he had basically Sherlock Holmes in the world of Cthulhu. In an H.P. Lovecraft world, he's fighting cultists and things like that. There's another guy who does that same thing, because all that stuff's public domain now. The difference is that, like, the other guy never captured me. Like, I don't read his books when they come out because there's an honesty maybe I don't feel in the character. It feels kind of 2-dimensional. Whereas the flair that Lovegrove has telling those same stories, it's the same character, same type of setting. Like, If you're relying on just, hey, Sherlock Holmes and Cthulhu, well, it's an open field. There's plenty of guys there. But why is that the one that I read? It's because of the character. It's because of the development. It's because of the emotional impact that that character feels. Like that character, the story exists in such a way that like I want to know what this guy, this person that I feel like is gonna deal with it, and I could never do that in the other guy's novels. Obviously, the fact that I call him the other guy and never bothered to commit his name to memory it says a lot.